Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. While we work with everyone, our mission is to promote the hiring of veterans and first responders. I hope you will consider us for all your career counseling, staffing, and professional writing needs. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. Today, I am honored to be joined by Max Krangle. We will be discussing how can an industry that annually kills 8 million customers have record profits? Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits as well as high net worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at info@pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Max, welcome to the show.
Bruce, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Take a minute or two and please introduce yourself to our viewers.
My name is Max Krangle. I'm based in Toronto, Canada. I am Managing Director of Counsel Strategy, which is a legal management consultancy that focuses in high-risk and contentious industries, and we have offices in Toronto and in London, England. I'm an attorney by trade. I barred in the UK, the European Union, and originally California as well. Practiced for many years, most notably working in-house in the global tobacco industry. My last two positions, I was International General Counsel of Reynolds Global Products, based in Zurich, Switzerland, and Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And prior to that, I was Assistant General Counsel of Japan Tobacco International, based in Geneva, Switzerland, and prior to that, in the UK.
Well, as I said, welcome. My first question came to me when I was writing my weekly LinkedIn article. And the last one I posted was about wokeism. And I touched on the recent gathering in Davos. And the one thing that came out was that, with all due respect to the participants, they're basically hypocrites. You don't bemoan climate change and global warming and fly in 1,000 private jets to Switzerland. The critics of smoking were not hypocrites. They wouldn't go home and after a nice demonstration have a cigarette or a cigar or smoke their pipes. How do you confront? How do you respond to? I don't want to say fight, because that's not what I don't want anybody to think that I'm talking about violence. How do you respond to critics who honestly believe what they are saying, are not hypocrites, and are interested in the common good?
I mean, great question, very loaded question, but a great question, Bruce. Let me start off by saying that no one should smoke. It is terrible for you. Frankly, it's probably worse than anyone thinks it is. The long-term effects of smoking on the human body are quite frankly horrendous, and it comes as no surprise to anyone that 8 million people a year worldwide die from a tobacco-related illness. Put that into perspective with the lives lost during COVID-19, and one has to wonder, what's going on here? How is this allowed to continue? So I don't think anyone seriously in the year 2023 is going to say that there are any health benefits with smoking or that smoking is safe. Smoking is not safe. It's very unsafe. It's very unhealthy. And it is a good chance that if you smoke over a long period of time, it is going to kill you. But hypocrites are hypocrites. And I think it goes further than the person that is anti-tobacco going home and smoking, because that's a personal choice, and smoking is an adult choice. It remains legal in most countries in the world, virtually all countries in the world. And as a result of that, if someone wants to smoke and criticize it at the same time, and rightly criticize it at the same time, I don't see that as being hypocritical. What I do see as being hypocritical is the attitudes towards smoking that come from the governments worldwide. The vast majority of governments, certainly in the Western world, have had an anti-tobacco stance largely since the 1964 U.S. Surgeon General's report was published in the United States. And as a result of that anti-smoking stance, they have employed various anti-smoking pieces of legislation and policies that admittedly differ by country in terms of severity, but they have undertaken many, many measures in order to curb smoking in their country, curb the sale of tobacco products, and also regulate what's in the product, how that product is sold, where it's sold, who it can be sold to, and how it's marketed. And again, that varies by country. But that's on the outset. The hypocritical part is the money that these governments are actually still making themselves from the sale of those cigarette products. And the best example I can give you is this. Whilst the global tobacco industry historically and continues to get a very bad reputation for the product that it sells and the harmful effects that that product causes when it is sold, it is still very much a legal product that they are selling. And the governments are profiting off of it to a very, very large extent. In fact, I don't think it would be a stretch to say that the tobacco industry has become a government industry. And what I mean by that is that in many Western countries in the world, it is the government that makes up to 80% of the profits from every pack of cigarettes sold through the high taxation of the product. They control who the product is sold to in a market. They control the trademarks over that product. And in many countries, they also control the price of that product. So when you have a stakeholder in an industry that is taking 80% of the profits, that is controlling the sale, who it can be sold to, controlling the intellectual property, and in many cases controlling the price, they might actually be the industry. The government might have become the tobacco industry themselves, rather than the tobacco companies who have very little leverage and very little say anymore into how that product is made, sold, and regulated. That to me is what's happening.
You're a good lawyer. You didn't answer my question.
Okay.
How do you respond when someone criticizes you with good intention? Somebody comes over to you and says, Max, don't you know that smoking is addictive, nicotine is addictive, cigarettes kill? How can you possibly be involved with this industry? How do you respond?
Well, let me first tell you that you don't have to start your tape recorder now with what I'm about to say, because I'm freely saying this, and that is that nicotine is addictive and smoking does kill. That has been the policy of the vast majority of the global tobacco companies worldwide for many decades now. There is no hiding behind the harmful effects and the long-term effects of smoking and the damage that it causes to the human body. All of that is known, all of that is true. And certainly no one is hiding behind that in the year 2023. That may well have been the case in what happened with Jeffrey Wygant and that scandal that broke in the 1990s. But today, that is certainly not the case. Secondly, bar the country of Bhutan, the manufacture, sale, and consumption of tobacco products may be regulated, but remains 100% legal. And so I worked in a legal industry that was legally selling a product. Admittedly, that product was a very dangerous product, but smoking remains an adult choice. People are not forced to smoke. And as a result of that, I would literally say, listen, I live in the free world. I work in the free world. Smoking is not mandatory. And if you want to take that risk yourself, with the usage and consumption of that product, that is up to you. But I'm working as a lawyer for a very, albeit contentious industry, but one that remains legal, pays its taxes, and continues in business to this day.
I will not give a free plug and endorsement to the cough syrup I took before the start of this podcast for obvious reasons, and I apologize to our viewers. What I'm trying to get at is that if somebody is arguing with you, what's the best way to get the wind out of their sails?
Agreeing with them. And I think that, to me, has got to be the most salient point from any conversation I've had about tobacco and the harmful effects of tobacco products, certainly over the last 20 years. And that is, don't you know that cigarettes are addictive? Yes, they're addictive. They contain nicotine. Don't you know that cigarettes kill up to 8 million people a year worldwide? Yes, we do. I think that is the tactic that has been employed by the tobacco industry, certainly since following the master settlement agreement that was signed in the United States in the late 90s. And that is one of, rather than adopting an ostrich approach or a denial approach to all of the harmful effects and consequences of tobacco usage, to acknowledging that and warning people of what those effects are of usage and long-term usage, making sure that everyone has the facts associated with that, and being open and honest. And when you do that, you really do take the wind out of someone's sails, because there's nothing worse for them than you agreeing with them they can't really criticize. And there's certainly no reason to. Whilst we still remain in a world where we don't know technically what causes cancer, and I'm not sure, I'm not a doctor, but I'm still pretty sure that there is still no direct causal link between smoking and cancer, or lung cancer being one of hundreds of known tobacco-related illnesses. Of course, what you do know is that smoking causes cancer in many smokers, and that if you take a cross-section of unfortunate people that are suffering from lung cancer, there's a good chance that a very large proportion of them will have been smokers themselves. So not wanting to split the hairs on any of those issues, because I don't think it's sensible to do so, the denial approach is no longer going to work, and hasn't worked for me.
So that's the first lesson. If you're confronted by someone who is opposed to what you're doing, and doesn't make any sense to argue with them, don't argue with them. But the question of the podcast is, you're killing 8 million people, or 8 million people are dying a year from your product. Yet you're still in business. And I mean you personally, because you're no longer in tobacco, but tobacco industry is still legal, still in business. And not only are they still making money, but as I understand it, they're making very good money.
Yes.
So how, if a package of cigarettes, which I don't smoke, and I've never bought a pack of cigarettes, but $15-20 for a pack of cigarettes, 80% of it goes to the government, 20% goes to the manufacturer. How do they make money if they're losing half of their customers every year?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I'll answer it in the best way that I can. First and foremost, that 80% is a general rule. It really depends on the country. That percentage is slightly lower in the United States than, say, it is in Canada or Great Britain. But let's just say a large percentage of the sale of every pack goes to the government in taxes, or some other kind of governmental charge, whether you want to call it a tax or not. the answer is actually fairly simple. And it's one based that didn't happen overnight. It's manifested itself now over several decades. And it has been a shift away from a shift away from the traditional model of selling tobacco products, and one in which that has dealt with a huge amount of people, particularly in the Western world, giving up smoking, and that the sale and the usage of the product being regulated by the government. And by and large, it's worked like this. If we take a 20 to 30 year time period, it's safe to say that there are less than half the amount of people smoking in the Western world today than there was about 20 to 30 years ago. As a general rule, it of course varies by country, but that's a good number to go by. So the industry itself has far fewer customers than they did previously. And that should come as no surprise to anyone when you see what has transpired in the news and in the media as to what's been known and what's been information has been disseminated towards the harmful effects of smoking. Not to mention all of the anti-smoking campaigns and all of the restrictions that have been put upon the industry, whether those restrictions are where you can smoke the product, where you can buy the product, how much you pay for the product, what kind of advertising you see for the product, whether you can access that product at the point of sale or not. And that has changed dramatically over the last 20 to 30 years. And that's where the government has regulated the industry. It's not just about putting health warnings on packets of cigarettes or banning advertising in certain mediums, like on television or on radio or in movie cinemas or anything like that. They've banned vending machines. They've gotten rid of product descriptors. They've in some markets they've restricted the use of trademarks. They have restricted where the product can be sold. In some countries, they put the sale of the product behind the counter. All of these measures themselves have had an effect on the sale of the product in a country, and generally speaking, less people are smoking. But that doesn't make it less profitable. And here's why. First and foremost, when you get rid of advertising and you ban virtually all types of tobacco advertising, it's important to understand that in the 1970s and 1980s, the tobacco industry was spending tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars every year advertising their products. But when you can no longer advertise those products anymore, and everyone's on a relatively level playing field, very, very few exceptions, those hundreds of millions of dollars that you were spending on advertising and sponsorship, well, that just goes right to the bottom line. You don't have to spend the money and nor do your competitors. When you get rid of when you get rid of product descriptors, in some countries you can no longer use the words light, mild, and ultra, you go from a whole range of having 10 different SKUs of a particular product to one or two. And you get rid of flavorings and menthol and other kinds of differentiators in a product that go into the recipe. Well, your manufacturing costs go down as well. So now you're playing in a circumstance where your manufacturing costs are less because it's cheaper to make your product because you're making less different varieties of them, and you're no longer having to spend the money on sponsorship and advertising, and no one else is as well. Other markets, like in the United Kingdom and in Canada, and this may seem shocking to Americans, you can't even see the tobacco products at the point of sale anymore. They're literally behind a locked cabinet in a gas station or a variety store or a grocery store, wherever they happen to be sold. And you can't see them. So on that basis, effectively what the government has done is fixed your market share against all the other manufacturers so that no new companies, there can be no new market entrants into the product. So that means that everyone's market shares are virtually frozen and no new competitors can join the market in selling those tobacco products. But the most important thing is that they have started to tax those products, and they tax them heavily. You use the saying it's $15 to $20 for a pack of cigarettes. Again, that not only depends on the country, it also very much depends on the jurisdiction. Where you are in the northeast of the United States is relatively expensive. You can go down to parts of the South, certainly in Florida, a packet of Marlboros and others is still well under $10. So it really depends on the province or the state or the country where you're purchasing them. But yes, the product has increased exponentially. 30 years ago, a packet of cigarettes, generally speaking, cost no more than $1. Today, it's anywhere between $10 to $20. Now, I'm no mathematician, but I would much rather have the profitability earning 20% of $15 or $20 than earning 70% of $1. The numbers don't make sense anymore. So even though there are far few people smoking cigarettes and more importantly, purchasing cigarettes in many markets, or in Western markets around the world, they are purchasing their products at anywhere between 15 to 20 times the cost they were doing previously. Now, again, a lot of that goes to taxation, but the profitability of the pack has greatly increased. Half the amount of smokers, but you're making, anywhere between 10 to 20 times more than you were making previously. Coupled with all of the savings that you're taking from not having to advertise, much lower manufacturing costs, and having fixed market shares without the worry of any new market entrants, you've almost got a perfect business. And so the tobacco industry, even though it appears to be in decline and sales appear to be in decline in much of the Western world, in actual fact, profitability-wise, the most profitable markets in the world are the most expensive, highly regulated markets. Even though you're selling a lot fewer cigarettes in the United States than you are in places like Russia or Kazakhstan, the margins are so much better, and the conditions in which you're operating allow you to save so much more that it's a much more profitable business in the highly restricted markets than in the relatively freer, newer markets elsewhere.
I want to take exception to something you said about the ban on advertising. Mm-hmm. When I walk by the local convenience store, there's a sign on the door. It says something like tobacco sales 21 years of age minimum. Mm-hmm. You're in Manhattan, you walk by a building, no smoking within 50 feet of the entrance. It's common nature that when you're told you can't do something, that's pretty much what you want to do.
Sure.
So what's the impact of all the no smoking signs on smoking?
That's a great question, Bruce. In fact, I would argue that the continued usage of no smoking signs worldwide is the best advertising, generic, unbranded advertising for cigarette smoking anywhere in the world. It's completely free. It's in every possible room, plane, bus station, train, classroom, everywhere in the world, there's a sign telling you that you cannot smoke. But importantly, what does that sign tell you? It doesn't smoke, you can't ever smoke. It doesn't say you shouldn't smoke. It just says you can't smoke right here, right now. But smoking's still an option for you to smoke elsewhere. And so arguably, the continued usage of no smoking signs everywhere in the world is the greatest advertising campaign for smoking that ever lived. It may not be a direct advertisement for the likes of Marlboro or Vantage or Winston or any other brand of cigarette available on the market, but it is an ad for smoking itself, constantly reminding smokers and non-smokers alike that smoking is still allowed, smoking is still permitted, just not at that particular place at that particular time. And as I said, arguably one of the greatest and remains one of the greatest advertising campaigns ever.
There are two more topics I want to get to. First one is marijuana. What can the government and the industry learn from tobacco regarding the sale of marijuana and the legalization of marijuana?
So I would say that the interesting point about the legalization of marijuana and Many states in the Union in the United States have already legalized the recreational use of marijuana. Certainly that's been done federally across all of Canada at the moment. In Europe, it remains a very, very different situation. The learning that I think they can take is that to date, the legalization itself deals with the plant. It deals with the plant, not with the finished product. The ingestion method of choice by marijuana users, so far as I'm is smoking of rolling up and smoking of the marijuana in what you could call a joint or a spliff or a marijuana cigarette. The toxic constituents of that, of doing so, are on levels that even a packet of Marlboro cigarettes or an equally strong packet of cigarettes may not see. What I mean by that is that that packet of cigarettes is regulated. The amount of the amount of tar and carbon monoxide and nicotine that you will inhale with every puff of that cigarette is not only listed on the side of the pack, it's also controlled by law in every country of the world. The yields matter. That has not been done with cannabis usage. The sale of cannabis usage has been regulated to the leaf itself rather than the finished product. And as a result of that, many people are using that product and inhaling toxic constituents that are far worse than any cigarette would ever deliver to you. I don't want to give you precise numbers, but I do understand that in many circumstances, an unfiltered marijuana cigarette that you roll yourself could have as much toxic constituents as an entire pack of store-bought tobacco cigarettes. So that, I believe, is a potential problem. And it's a problem because, as I started off by saying, the ingestion method of choice is smoking, not the oral usage of the product, whether through some kind of gummy or drink or something else, which is a totally different circumstance. All you're doing then is putting the THC into your bloodstream to achieve a high. You're not getting the toxic constituents of combustion by lighting these leaves on fire and inhaling the smoke and everything that comes with that. So if there's any learning from the tobacco industry to the marijuana industry, I would say, and we're not going to see this for many decades to come, but I would probably think it's safe to assume that X number of years down the line, we are going to see more people suffering from another pulmonary or pulmonary related kind of disease, possibly a lung disease associated with smoking marijuana cigarettes, because the governments have failed to legislate any kind of safety standards with finished products in cannabis. They've just regulated the leaf itself and allowed people to use it in a way that, quite frankly, can be very, very dangerous to you by virtue of the toxic constituents that are being delivered to you. And that should be paid. Much closer attention should be paid to that in the future.
Max, I want to thank you for coming on, and I'm going to share your contact information with our viewers. And my final question is there anything that I did not ask that you wish I had asked? And if I had asked it, how would you have responded?
Great question, Bruce. You didn't ask me if I was a smoker. And my answer to that question is I'm not a smoker. I gave up over 10 years ago. It was a personal choice to do it for health reasons. I followed some of the data on it. I had a young family, and I realized that, albeit having worked in the industry, I had a fairly unlimited supply of tobacco products at my disposal, but that it was time to leave my particular habit behind and not to do it anymore. And I made a health choice from it, and I'm still very, very thankful that I made that choice. That being said, do I miss it? The answer is yes. I do not believe that any person out there that has been a non-smoker for life cannot possibly understand the satisfaction that is delivered to you by smoking a cigarette. Yes, it's terrible. Yes, it most likely will kill you. But I got to tell you, I miss it. Smoking as a pastime was fantastic. And if I could find a way to smoke cigarettes in a healthy way, I definitely would. It's not going to happen. It'll never happen. But that doesn't mean I don't listen.
Well, Max, thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your insights. And I'm sure all of our viewers appreciate you having taken the time to join me.
Pleasure to be here, Bruce.
I'm Bruce Hurwitz. Thank you for watching. And as always, please stay focused on success.